humongous calculation or number. And we're going to look here, and these are called fiat currencies. The major currency pairs, the euro, the yen, the New Zealand Australian dollars, the yuan, the Swiss franc, British pound, US and Canadian dollars. These 9 currency pairs dominate the Forex market. And there's trade going on all the time. US, euro, you know, there's trade going on between people traveling there, businesses doing business, Japan, Britain. So there's $5 trillion every day, every 24 hours is exchanged backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. They're called fiat currencies. Now, people don't understand fiat currencies. So let's just watch a quick video on that, because this is the system we're already involved in. And it's important to understand what system we're involved in to realize what a bankrupt system it really is, and how it is evolving into the next natural evolution of the currency system, which has to be 100% purely digital via the internet. But let's have a look at fiat currencies and listen to what people have to say about it.
Well, fiat currency, of course, is a currency that exists at the dictate or by fiat from a government. You say they have their printing presses, and the paper money rolls off the printing presses. And then they give it the fiat designation, which makes the currency official. It's just worthless paper. But when Ben Bernanke gives it the special sign, and they have the cult meeting at the Federal Open Market Committee meetings, it suddenly becomes currency.
If you look at what's really going on, it's a con game. And so there's confidence. Well, the Federal Reserve is very forthright about what they're doing. If you read their websites, they'll tell you it's a confidence game. They tell you that there's no intrinsic value in their money. They'll tell you that they print it backed by absolutely nothing. They actually display all these facts. But if you tell somebody in the public that this stuff is created out of thin air, there's no backing whatsoever, it's absolutely worthless, it's about as valuable as monopoly money, they'll look at you like you're nuts.
Okay. The only real value that these currencies have is the relationship to other currencies around it. Okay. It's 1972 when President Nixon took the US dollar off the gold system. It was backed by gold, or partially backed by gold, until 1972. Well, that's no longer available. Now, since 2009, there's a new boy on the block, a new currency in the market called Bitcoin. And what Bitcoin is doing more and more over time is coming into equilibrium with these other 9 currencies at the top as far as trading volume is concerned. Now, if you remember back in the day when the euro first came out, you know, the Euro skeptics were, oh, it'll never last. The Germans have made a massive mistake dumping the Deutschmark. The British didn't. They stayed with the British pound. They didn't go euro. But the euro, you know, you put your money into, you'll lose it all. Well, guess what? The euro now is the most heavily traded currency against the US dollar in terms of trade or exchange. And if you'd put some cash into the euro when it first came out, you'd be worth a small fortune today. But again, the skeptics, you know, ooh, doom and gloom. Well, the same thing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin right now is coming into equilibrium with the other 9 currency pairs. It's currency number 10. It just needs to now go through a little bit of regulation and licensing and to become a true new currency. And then it's going to come into equilibrium with the others as far as exchange volume is concerned. And you're going to see it come up in value in terms of what that relationship is. So we've seen Bitcoin trade as much as $22 billion or $2,200 million. 2,200 million is 22 billion in a 24-hour period of time, which is quite significant. It's beginning to move then. We've seen Bitcoin become, well, it's right now $250 billion. It's gone up to, well, the crypto market became as much as $750 billion just before Christmas of last year. So trading volume is consistently getting more and more and more and more with this. It trades 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So let's have a little look deeper. So Satoshi Nakamoto, go to Wikipedia, type in Bitcoin, and it's going to come up with Satoshi, or type in Satoshi in Wikipedia. And it says here that Satoshi Nakamoto is the unknown person or persons who designed Bitcoin and the first blockchain database. And it's the other funny word you're going to be learning about is blockchain. Speculation about the true identity of Satoshi Nakamoto has focused on a number of computer science experts living in the United States and Europe. So let's have a look here. The word Bitcoin is broken into two words, Satoshi, and that is Japanese for that. 0.12346 zeros with a 1 at the end is Japanese for Satoshi, or the word Japanese for Satoshi is that. That is the smallest bit of a Bitcoin. So if we look at, well, what's a coin? Well, a coin obviously is, where's my little mouse gone here? Come on. It's not moving here. Why not? Hang on, I'm going to escape out and come back in, I think. It's probably because I've been jumping backwards and forwards too. Hang on a second here. Okay, the word Bitcoin. Okay, so Satoshi is that. So a coin obviously is 1. So that's why it's a bit of a coin. That's where the name came from, bit of a coin. And Nakamoto is a very prestigious name in Japan. If you're a Nakamoto, it's like being a Rothschild or a Sinclair or something of that nature, which is interesting because Japan made it the first country in the world to make it legal tender. Now, this is good. You want to absolutely find this one on TED.com. Go to TED.com, type in Don Tapscott, Bitcoin and Blockchain Technologies, and watch the whole 40-minute video. Now, I've clipped that down to 2 minutes of the most important bit that he's talking about, and he explains blockchain far better than I can. So let's watch this.
The technology likely to have the greatest impact on the next few decades has arrived. And it's not social media, it's not big data, it's not robotics, it's not even AI. And you'll be surprised to learn that it's the underlying technology of digital currencies like Bitcoin. It's called the blockchain. Blockchain. Now, it's not the most sonorous word in the world, but I believe that this is now the next generation of the internet, and that it holds vast promise for every business, every society, and for all of you individually. You know, for the past few decades, we've had the internet of information. And when I send you an email or a PowerPoint file or something, I'm actually not sending you the original, I'm sending you a copy. And that's great. This is democratized information. But when it comes to assets, things like money, financial assets like stocks and bonds, loyalty points, intellectual property, music, art, a vote, carbon credit, and other assets, sending you a copy is a really bad idea. If I send you $100, it's really important that I don't still have money and that I can't send it to you. So this has been called the double spend problem by cryptographers for a long time. So today, we rely entirely on big intermediaries, middlemen like banks, government, big social media companies, credit card companies, and so on, to establish trust in our economy. And these intermediaries perform all the business and transaction logic of every kind of commerce, from authentication, identification of people, through to clearing, settling, and record keeping. And overall, they do a pretty good job, but there are growing problems. To begin, they're centralized. That means that they can be hacked, and increasingly are. And JP Morgan, the US federal government, LinkedIn, Home Depot, and others found that out the hard way. They exclude billions of people from the global economy. For example, people who don't have enough money to have a bank account. They slow things down. It can take a second for an email to go around the world, but it can take days or weeks for money to move through the banking system across the city. And they take a big piece of the action, 10 to 20%, just to send money to another country. They capture our data, and that means that we can't monetize it or use it to better manage our lives. And our privacy is being undermined. And the biggest problem is that overall, they've appropriated the largesse of the digital age asymmetrically. In 2008, the financial industry crashed, and perhaps propitiously, a unknown or anonymous person or persons named Satoshi Nakamoto created a paper where he developed a protocol for a digital cash that used an underlying cryptocurrency called Bitcoin. And this cryptocurrency enabled people to establish trust and do transactions without a third party. And the seemingly simple act set off a spark that's ignited the world, that has everyone excited or terrified or otherwise interested in many places. But the real pony here is the underlying technology. It's called blockchain. So, for the first time now in human history, people everywhere can trust each other and transact peer-to-peer. And trust is established not by some big institution, but by collaboration, by cryptography, and by some clever code. And because trust is native to the technology, I call this the trust protocol. Now you're probably wondering, well, how does this thing work? Fair enough. Assets, digital assets like money to music and everything in between, are not stored in a central place, but they're distributed across a global ledger using the highest level of cryptography. And when a transaction is conducted, it's posted globally across millions and millions of computers. And out there around the world is a group of people called miners. These are not young people, they're Bitcoin miners. And they have massive computing power at their fingertips, 10 to 100 times bigger than all of Google worldwide. And these miners do a lot of work. And every 10 minutes, kind of like the heartbeat of a network, a block gets created that has all the transactions from the previous 10 minutes. And then, this is the key part, that block is linked to the previous block and the previous block to create a chain of blocks. And everyone is time-stamped, kind of like with a digital wax seal. So if I wanted to go and hack a block and say, pay you and you with the same money, I'd have to hack that block, plus all the preceding blocks, the entire history of commerce on that blockchain, not just on one computer, but across millions of computers simultaneously, all using the highest levels of encryption in the light of the most powerful computing resource in the world that's watching me. Tough to do. And this is infinitely more secure than the computer systems that we have today. Blockchain, that's how it works.
There you go, blockchain, that's how it works. You want to watch the whole video, absolutely brilliant. So let's have a little look at this Bitcoin blockchain thing. Bitcoin, within the Bitcoin blockchain, there's a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins will ever be in existence. As of April the 20th, there was 16,989,125. And every 10 minutes, when the new block is created every 10 minutes, there's 12.5 new Bitcoin is added to the supply at any particular point in time. Now, interestingly enough, every 3 to 4 years, that halves. So when Bitcoin first came out, there was 50 Bitcoin every 10 minutes. Then a couple of years later, it went from 50 to 25. And then in 2017, it went to 12.5. And in 2020, it's going to go to 6.25. So what happens is a supply and demand. As there's more people demanding Bitcoin and acquiring Bitcoin, the supply of new Bitcoin goes down by 50%. New Bitcoin every 3 to 4 years. So it means that the value and price of it goes up consistently, which is very interesting because it's anti-inflationary. It's accepted via a global merchant base and can be exchanged backwards and forwards through fiat currencies through exchanges and or Bitcoin ATMs. And this is what a Bitcoin ATM looks like. It looks exactly the same as a fiat currency ATM. You just walk up, you scan your Bitcoin wallet on your phone, and you're either sending Bitcoin to the machine and getting currency coming out, or you're putting currency in the machine and getting Bitcoin into your e-wallet, electronic wallet, your e-wallet. Up in the right-hand corner there, if you see the reflection, that's me taking a picture of a Bitcoin machine here in Calgary when it was 6,000 Canadian dollars, just to give you an idea of it. But these are all over the place. There's thousands and probably tens of thousands all around the world. You just type in Bitcoin ATM, comma, the city that you live in or where you're traveling to, and you'll see a map of all these Bitcoin ATMs pop up here. This is what a wallet looks like on your phone, and you can set up as many sub-wallets as you want. So you might have one for yourself, one for your family members, one for college fund, one for travel, one for whatever. You can set these up, and at the bottom, there's four or five little buttons. That's home, receive, scan, send. You're either receiving Bitcoin, you're sending Bitcoin, or you're scanning Bitcoin. So, for instance, the bottom left-hand corner here with the two girls there with their phones, one could be sending Bitcoin to the other. So one would go receive, the other one would scan the receive code. It's like a square barcode that pops up. The phones are talking to each other directly. You enter in the amount of Bitcoin or cash in value of Bitcoin that you want to send. Press the button, and hey presto, it's there, done, finished, next. It's absolutely remarkable. There's a news article I got the other day where Microsoft and Starbucks are setting up an exchange where they're going to be accepting, the exchange between fiat and Bitcoin and so on and so forth. And the futures exchange they're going to be setting up, and they're also going to be taking orders very soon in Starbucks using Bitcoin as a medium to pay for your frappuccinos and so on and so forth. I'll get that article up here at some point in time. So it's beginning to gain traction and momentum. Let's go to the next slide here. Now, Bitcoin exchanges have different prices, and they all got funny names: Bitflix and Bitstamp and Coinbase and Kraken and Quadriga and so on and so forth. But then again, when you think about it, banks have funny names too. Bank of America, TD Bank, HSBC, and so on and so forth. It's just a matter of terminology is all it is. And they have different prices depending on how fast the Bitcoin is exchanged. And those exchanges can be different prices. And you don't have to understand or even learn this stuff. It's just background knowledge. But at any particular point in time, depending on how fast you want the exchange to occur, and even on your wallet on your phone, you can tell them to send it regular speed, or, priority speed. There's 5 different speeds. The faster the speed, the higher the exchange rate. But typically for a $2 or $3 or $4 or $5,000 exchange for Bitcoin, when you're sending it around the world, is about 15 or 20 cents. 15. I did one just the other day. It was 2,000 Canadian dollars, and it was 20 cents. I think it was 14 cents Canadian to send that, which is a fraction of what it would cost if I wire transferred that stuff around here. So that's interesting to know. Now, let's have a look here. We've got 2017, Bitcoin was really the age of acceptance. Prior to 2017, there was only 43,000 people on the planet had one or more Bitcoins. And we know that because there's a public ledger. You can open up the public ledger and see every single wallet that is owned by people and how much Bitcoin is in each wallet. Now, at this point in time, you don't know who owns the wallets except if you're in Japan. That's why they made it legal tender. In Japan, if you download an e-wallet and you want to put Bitcoin in, you've got to let them know who you are, just like a bank account. If you open up a bank account, it's, who are you? What's your name? Where do you live? What's your phone number? They want some information about you. Well, right now, if you download a Bitcoin wallet, except if you're in Japan, they don't want to know anything. Nobody knows anything. They just know that the wallet exists and what's in the wallet. It's anonymous. That is going to change and has to change through regulation. And once it's changed and it becomes legal tender in countries around the world, it's going to soar, absolutely soar. But the age of acceptance is when the public really started to sit up and take notice as to what was going on. And this is what got me excited. As I say, I could have gotten involved in 2009 at 10 cents each, and they've been pitched over and over and over again on Bitcoin. But I didn't get it. April the 1st, when I read this, I thought to myself, well, I still don't get it, but I'm going to get in. I don't care what I know or don't know, I'm in. Because if governments are making Bitcoin legal tender, well, I'm in. So I went to an exchange here. I cashed in a bit of gold, went to an exchange. Look at the price. I could have got in at 10 cents. So 1,133 a coin. I think the last time I was pitched on this, it was $100 a coin. But I didn't care. I'm in. I just want to know what it's all about. And, I gave the cash to the exchange person, and they say, great, what's your wallet receive code? I don't know, what's that? Well, you need to download an e-wallet. Okay, so got into the Apple App Store and for free downloaded an e-wallet, clicked on a couple of things. They sent me the Bitcoin, and now I had Bitcoin. Wow, I've got an e-wallet. What's that all? And I started to understand and learn what this was all about. Now, since then, Japan has issued 11 Bitcoin exchange licenses and so on and so forth here. But again, Wikipedia. What's the story in Japan? 126 million people. We've only got about 30 million in Canada. So 126 million people are going to start using Bitcoin. It doesn't take a genius to understand that Bitcoin is going to go up in value very quickly indeed. So that I wanted to be at the beginning of this thing. I didn't care whether it was 1,000 or 3,000 or 20 cents. I was in, because it just makes perfect sense that it's going to go absolutely through the roof. And millions of businesses will start accepting Bitcoin. They're getting the terminals in, and they're getting the wallets downloaded and getting up to speed, which means that tens of millions of Japanese will start using Bitcoin. And as of the end of 2017, give or take a bit, 40% of all Bitcoin transactions are occurring in Japan. And here's a cubicle right there on the street where you can just go in and get some Bitcoin. They're all over the place. And indeed, Bitcoin went through the roof. Here's countries where it's legal. Now, in some countries, it's not legal, it's not illegal, there's gray areas, but there's nothing that governments can do to shut Bitcoin down. They can't raid an office. They can't arrest the CEO, because there is no office. There's no CEO. There's no corporate structure. It is, as he said, distributed across a public ledger via the internet across millions of computers. And there's no way that any single government can shut down the internet. It's just not going to happen. So what governments are doing is basically putting their hands up in the air and said, well, if you can't beat them, you're going to join them. And now we're beginning to see regulation and licensing coming through. Now, the other question that came up all over that, well, where's Bitcoin accepted? Well, it's accepted everywhere, everywhere. If you really understand it. I mean, it's any business with the thinking caps on will take Bitcoin in one shape or another. Big companies and corporations here already geared their business model towards Bitcoin. Richard Branson here with his Virgin Galactic, and is between him and Jeff Bezos with, Blue Horizon for space tourism. The Blue Horizon is going to cost $300,000 for a 40-minute trip up into outer space and back. I think Richard Branson is charging $100,000 for his trip in this machine here that should be launched maybe with a passenger by the end of this year, but certainly by next year, which is when Bitcoin reaches $100,000. It's a Bitcoin. His order books are full. This takes up 8 passengers a day. His order books are full for about 3 years, I believe. Tesla, $30,000 brand spanking new Tesla. These new ones that have just come out. So I can assure you, I've got my 1/3 of a Bitcoin to one side, waiting for Bitcoin to hit 100,000. And then I'm off to the Tesla dealership to get the brand spanking new Tesla to, whoop, there's my 1/3 of a coin. Done, finished. And that would have cost me, what, about $3,000 to get a $30,000 car paid for up front. So companies like this are already geared up for that. Well, if you're, like shopping at Amazon, you can download an application and start using Bitcoin at Amazon. Well, that's 2.3 billion people on the planet can use Bitcoin there. Now, what's the entertainment industry saying about Bitcoin? Okay, well, there's Amazon Prime. There's 46 million customers with Amazon Prime, and you just type in Bitcoin and documentaries pop up left, right, and center. Watch these things. They're really, really good. Educate yourself. I'm a Netflix sort of guy. I like Netflix. Well, there's another 104 million customers for Netflix around the planet. Type in Bitcoin. You got a couple of documentaries and a movie on Bitcoin. And again, watch that. Go to YouTube and type in Bitcoin in YouTube. Well, I mean, there's dozens and dozens and dozens. I like this one, Bill Gates. Ooh, nobody can stop Bitcoin now. And how it works in 5 minutes and banking on Bitcoin and blah, blah, blah. This one here, the one at the bottom, 10 reasons Bitcoin price will destroy all-time highs in 2017. I watched that and immediately went and cashed in a bit more gold and got more Bitcoin. That's only, at that time, 147,000 people had seen it. I couldn't believe it. 7 billion people on the planet, and only 147,000 people are watching this sort of thing. 1.5 million people have watched Bitcoin Facts, and these are the people that are getting educated and getting into it. There's no excuse. This guy at the bottom here, Andreas Antonopoulos, The Death of Money, very clever guy. I mean, he just walks up and down on stage and blabs on about Bitcoin and cryptos, but he knows his stuff, and you listen to him and you're going, holy smokes, am I ever glad we're on the cutting edge of what this is all about here. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. There's an interesting one, the banker's worst fear. Why do banks fear Bitcoin? Well, it's real simple. So if you walk into a bank and you say, well, I'm off to Europe for a holiday, I need some euros. Oh, certainly, sir, no problem at all. How many do you want? Well, give me a couple of $1,000s worth. Is that all? Because they make an exchange fee for exchanging American or Canadian dollars into euros. Now, if you then say, great, I got my euros. Can I get some Bitcoin from you? Oh, you better stay away from that. Because what are you doing? You're taking fiat currency from their accounts that they get paid on as managers. The more cash they've got in their bank, the more they get paid because of the exchange rates and everything goes on. You're taking it out of their bank, and they are not making an exchange fee into Bitcoin because they're not licensed and regulated to do it. So what you would do is take your cash out of the bank and go to a third-party exchange to get your Bitcoin. They make the exchange fee, and the banks don't. Now, they don't like that. So it's been, woo, doom and gloom. Well, things are changing. So let's have a look at the financial industry in Bitcoin. This is where we're going to get into this extra little curricular activity today. A massive destruction. Now, this was back in October the 13th last year in England at the World Economic Forum or whatever it was, with thousands of the top money people in the world. You're talking the hedge fund managers, the bank account, the top financial people on the planet. And she puts the stick about and says, you've got to take it seriously, folks, because the cat's out the bag. The box is off, the lid's off the top of Pandora's box. And she says things like, Bitcoin puts a question mark on the fractional banking model we know today. In a remarkably frank talk, she speculated that Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies has as much future as the internet itself and could displace central banks, conventional banking, and challenge the monopoly of national monies. Well, since then, what have banks been doing? Oh, they've been freaking out. So now they're going forward and asking for regulation and licensing so they can do the exchanges as well and make a profit on this whole movement of capital. Now, we're going to look at fractional banking. Now, what does fractional banking really mean? This is the system that we are all involved in. That nobody understands what the dickens they're involved in. Inflation goes through the roof. Like when I was a kid, I'll give you an example. When I was 7 years old and we used to go shopping in England for, we're talking what, 50 odd years ago. I'm 59 now, so about 52 years ago. So we used to go shopping in England for groceries for the family, for 5 of us, 3 brothers, and there's 3 of us and my parents, there's 5 of us in the family. And you're talking, food for a week, which is a roast beef. We've got some chicken, we got our cereals, we got milk and potatoes, and we got, puddings and all that stuff. Of £5. It's about $7.50 for a family of 5 to be fed for a week. And now you look at it, just my wife and I, we just spent $230 for a week's supply. So it's not that food costs more, it's that the value of currency has gone down, and that's why things always get more and more expensive. That's about inflation. But fractional banking is the reason that we are subject to the hidden tax called inflation. This is about 15 minutes long, and I tell you, it's phenomenal information. And so listen carefully here. This, if you can find it, and it took me forever and a day to find this thing, Modern Money Mechanics. I got it, and I printed it out as a little PDF. It's only about 20 or 30 pages long, but the purpose of this booklet is describe the basic process of money creation in a fractional reserve banking system. Right, so let's really listen to and understand this. It's fascinating stuff.
Society today is composed of a series of institutions. From political institutions, legal institutions, religious institutions, to institutions of social class, familial values, and occupational specialization. It is obvious the profound influence these traditionalized structures have in shaping our understandings and perspectives. Yet, of all the social institutions we are born into, directed by, and conditioned upon, there seems to be no system as taken for granted and misunderstood as the monetary system. Taking on nearly religious proportions, the established monetary institution exists as one of the most unquestioned forms of faith there is. How money is created, the policies by which it is governed, and how it truly affects society are unregistered interests of the great majority of the population. Unfortunately, economics is often viewed with confusion and boredom. Endless streams of financial jargon coupled with intimidating mathematics quickly deters people from attempts at understanding it. However, the fact is, the complexity associated with the financial system is a mere mask, designed to conceal one of the most socially paralyzing structures humanity has ever endured. A number of years ago, the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, produced a document entitled Modern Money Mechanics. This publication detailed the institutionalized practice of money creation as utilized by the Federal Reserve and the web of global commercial banks it supports. On the opening page, the document states its objective. The purpose of this booklet is to describe the basic process of money creation in a fractional reserve banking system. It then proceeds to describe this fractional reserve process through various banking terminology, a translation of which goes something like this. The United States government decides it needs some money, so it calls up the Federal Reserve and requests, say, $10 billion. The Fed replies, saying, sure, we'll buy $10 billion in government bonds from you. So the government takes some pieces of paper, paints some official-looking designs on them, and calls them treasury bonds. Then it puts a value on these bonds to the sum of $10 billion and sends them over to the Fed. In turn, the people at the Fed draw up a bunch of impressive pieces of paper themselves, only this time calling them Federal Reserve notes, also designating a value of $10 billion to the set. The Fed then takes these notes and trades them for the bonds. Once this exchange is complete, the government then takes the $10 billion in Federal Reserve notes and deposits it into a bank account. And upon this deposit, the paper notes officially become legal tender money, adding $10 billion to the U.S. money supply. And there it is. $10 billion in new money has been created. Of course, this example is a generalization, for, in reality, this transaction would occur electronically, with no paper used at all. In fact, only 3% of the U.S. money supply exists in physical currency. The other 97% essentially exists in computers alone. Now, government bonds are, by design, instruments of debt. And when the Fed purchases these bonds, with money it essentially created out of thin air, the government is actually promising to pay back that money to the Fed. In other words, the money was created out of debt. This mind-numbing paradox of how money or value can be created out of debt or a liability will become more clear as we further this exercise. So, the exchange has been made and now $10 billion sits in a commercial bank account. Here's where it gets really interesting. For as based on the fractional reserve practice, that $10 billion deposit instantly becomes part of the bank's reserves, just as all deposits do. And regarding reserve requirements, as stated in Modern Money Mechanics, a bank must maintain legally required reserves equal to a prescribed percentage of its deposits. It then quantifies this by stating, under current regulations, the reserve requirement against most transaction accounts is 10%. This means that with a $10 billion deposit, 10% or $1 billion is held as the required reserve, while the other $9 billion is considered an excessive reserve and can be used as the basis for new loans. Now, it is logical to assume that this $9 billion is literally coming out of the existing $10 billion deposit. However, this is actually not the case. What really happens is that the $9 billion is simply created out of thin air on top of the existing $10 billion deposit. This is how the money supply is expanded. As stated in Modern Money Mechanics, of course they, the banks, do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. If they did this, no additional money would be created. What they do when they make loans is to accept promissory notes, loan contracts, in exchange for credits, money, to the borrower's transaction accounts. In other words, the $9 billion can be created out of nothing simply because there is a demand for such a loan and that there is a $10 billion deposit to satisfy the reserve requirements. Now, let's assume that somebody walks into this bank and borrows the newly available $9 billion. They will then most likely take that money and deposit it into their own bank account. The process then repeats, for that deposit becomes part of the bank's reserves. 10% is isolated, and in turn 90% of the $9 billion, or $8.1 billion, is now available as newly created money for more loans. And, of course, that 8.1 can be loaned out and redeposited, creating an additional 7.2 billion, to 6.5 billion, to 5.9 billion, etc. This deposit money creation loan cycle can technically go on to infinity. The average mathematical result is that about $90 billion can be created on top of the original $10 billion. In other words, for every deposit that ever occurs in the banking system, about 9 times that amount can be created out of thin air. So, now that we understand how money is created by this fractional reserve banking system, a logical yet elusive question might come to mind. What is actually giving this newly created money value? The answer? The money that already exists. The new money essentially steals value from the existing money supply. For the total pool of money is being increased irrespective to demand for goods and services. And as supply and demand finds equilibrium, prices rise, diminishing the purchasing power of each individual dollar. This is generally referred to as inflation, and inflation is essentially a hidden tax on the public.
What is the advice that you generally get? And that is inflate the currency. They don't say debase the currency. They don't say devalue the currency. They don't say cheat the people who are saved. They say lower the interest rates. The real deception is when we distort the value of money. When we create money out of thin air, we have no savings, and yet there's so-called capital. So my question boils down to this: how in the world can we expect to solve the problems of inflation, that is, the increase in the supply of money, with more inflation?
Of course, it can't. The fractional reserve system of monetary expansion is inherently inflationary. For the act of expanding the money supply without there being a proportional expansion of goods and services in the economy will always debase a currency. In fact, a quick glance at the historical values of the US dollar versus the money supply reflects this point definitively, for the inverse relationship is obvious. $1 in 1913 required $21.60 in 2007 to match value. That is a 96% devaluation since the Federal Reserve came into existence. Now, if this reality of inherent and perpetual inflation seems absurd and economically self-defeating, hold that thought, for absurdity is an understatement in regard to how our financial system really operates. For in our financial system, money is debt, and debt is money. Here is a chart of the U.S. money supply from 1950 to 2006. Here is a chart of the U.S. national debt for the same period. How interesting it is that the trends are virtually the same. For the more money there is, the more debt there is. The more debt there is, the more money there is. To put it a different way, every single dollar in your wallet is owed to somebody by somebody. For remember, the only way the money can come into existence is from loans. Therefore, if everyone in the country were able to pay off all debts, including the government, there would not be $1 in circulation. Now, so far we have discussed the reality that money is created out of debt, through loans. These loans are based on a bank's reserves, and reserves are derived from deposits. And through this fractional reserve system, any one deposit can create 9 times its original value, in turn debasing the existing money supply, raising prices in society. And since all this money is created out of debt and circulated randomly through commerce, people become detached from their original debt, and a disequilibrium exists where people are forced to compete for labor in order to pool enough money out of the money supply to cover their costs of living. As dysfunctional and backwards as all of this might seem, there is still one thing we have omitted from this equation. And it is this element of the structure which reveals the truly fraudulent nature of the system itself: the application of interest. When the government borrows money from the Fed, or when a person borrows money from a bank, it almost always has to be paid back with accrued interest. In other words, almost every single dollar that exists must be eventually returned to a bank with interest paid as well. But if all money is borrowed from the central bank and is expanded by commercial banks through loans, only what would be referred to as the principal is being created in the money supply. So then, where is the money to cover all of the interest that is charged? Nowhere. It doesn't exist. The ramifications of this are staggering, for the amount of money owed back to the banks will always exceed the amount of money that is available in circulation. This is why inflation is a constant in the economy, for new money is always needed to help cover the perpetual deficit built into the system, caused by the need to pay the interest. What this also means is that mathematically, defaults and bankruptcy are literally built into the system, and there will always be poor pockets of society that get the short end of the stick. An analogy would be a game of musical chairs, for once the music stops, somebody is left out to dry. And that's the point. It invariably transfers true wealth from the individual to the banks. For if you are unable to pay for your mortgage, they will take your property. This is particularly enraging when you realize that not only is such a default inevitable due to the fractional reserve practice, but also because of the fact that the money that the bank loaned to you didn't even legally exist in the first place. Think about it. Money is created out of debt. And what do people do when they are in debt? They submit to employment to pay it off. But if money can only be created out of loans, how can society ever be debt-free? It can't. And that's the point. And it is the fear of losing assets coupled with the struggle to keep up with the perpetual debt and inflation inherent in the system, compounded by the inescapable scarcity within the money supply itself, created by the interest that can never be repaid, that keeps the wage slave in line, running on the hamster wheel with millions of others, in effect powering an empire that truly benefits only the elite at the top of the pyramid. For, at the end of the day, who are you really working for? The banks. Money is created in a bank and invariably ends up in a bank. They are the true masters, along with the corporations and governments they support. Physical slavery requires people to be housed and fed. Economic slavery requires people to feed and house themselves. It is one of the most ingenious scams for social manipulation ever created, and at its core, it is an invisible war against the population. Debt is the weapon used to conquer and enslave societies, and interest is its prime ammunition.
There we have it. Now, I got to admit that I watched, well, I've seen that now about 100 times, but I had to watch it at least 10 times before I really got to understand what it's all about. So fractional banking creates inflation. So let's just learn a little bit about inflation.
It is sometimes amazing that we haven't experienced more inflation than we have. If they keep expanding the money supply so vastly, why aren't our prices growing faster than they really are? And the answer is that a good chunk of the money that the Fed created has been shipped overseas. I remember early in my research, I heard this expression that the Americans have exported their inflation. I thought, what is that? How can you export your inflation? Put it in a box and send it out? What do you do? Well, now I understand. You export your inflation by simply sending all these dollars that you created to these other countries, and then they send you their refrigerators and their cars and whatever, their TV sets. So you get hardware, and they get little pieces of paper. It's a great deal for the American people for a while. For a while. Sooner or later, all of those pigeons come home to roost. When the time comes, as it looks like it's now coming, when the rest of the world is saying, we don't want to play this game anymore, Uncle Sam's dollars are just becoming worthless, there are too many of them, we've got to find something else other than American dollars, then those dollars start to come back to America. People say, we don't want them anymore, what do we do with them? Once this revs up, and we've got this little trickle of money coming back that we previously exported, once it becomes a flood and it starts to rush back, now we are getting our former exported inflation brought back to us, and then we'll see the quantity of money inside the United States grow much more rapidly even than the Federal Reserve can create it, because we're getting a previous money back. And that's when we will really see the tanking of the U.S. dollar in terms of what it will buy.
Now, let's have a look at money supply.
In the past several years, I've spoken in many countries about the crisis that's coming, and a lot of people think that they're going to be okay in their country, that it's only going to happen to the United States or maybe the United States in Europe. But what they don't realize is that this is a global phenomenon. I got to show you something here. This is base currency in the United States. This is the number of paper dollars that exist, basically. It took 200 years to go from no dollars in existence to 825 billion. And then we had the bailouts, and then we had QE1, quantitative easing, 1, then QE2, and then we had QE3, and then QE4, and then soon we're going to have QE57 and QE382. And it isn't just here. This is what the Canadian currency supply looks like. This is Australia, South Africa, Russia. Now, this starts out in just the year 2001, and this is like 18 times more currency in existence in a little over a decade. Here's Singapore, same story. Look at that, since the crisis, just bam. India, China, every government on the planet is doing this insane deficit spending and expanding their currency supplies, doing bailouts, and history shows that there is no example of this turning out well.
I like the ending of that. There is no example of this turning out well. And there's not. There's no example of this turning out well at all. So the banking, they understand this. They know that the system has absolutely come to the end of its tether. It just can't get any more stupid than it already is. And so what do? You've got to move to the next portion or evolution, as I say, of the currency system, of the monetary system. And that's what Christine Lagarde has been doing here, is putting the stick about. It says here in a lecture, she chastised her colleagues for failing to embrace the future, and she warned that not so long ago, some experts argued that personal computers would never be adopted. Well, we all use them now, and the tablets would just be used as expensive coffee trays. Things are moving, technology speaking, much, much, much faster. So since she put the stick about there, they're all coming out the woodwork. Morgan Stanley said, well, it's more than just a fad, really. We knew it all the time, even though we were saying that, it's got no future whatsoever. Who's this dude? Oh, the US bank regulator opens doors to national license for Bitcoin firms. This is September the 29th. Now, when you go back now into history, which is then, there's massive changes already happened. The acting controller for the US Treasury Department says he's open to an idea of a new breed of banks might one day conduct business in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And Bank of America, I think it's the second largest bank, certainly in the United States and probably in the world, has already applied and been awarded a patent So the second largest bank in the US obtained a potential cryptocurrency exchange system that would convert one digital currency into another. And so they're already gearing up for the whole thing, getting ready for it. Goldman Sachs, right, is rumored to be putting together a new trading outfit dedicated to cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. What else have we got here? Oh, Friday the 13th, you know, an infamous day in the day of finances, the financial world. Friday the 13th of October. U.S. banks, if you're a U.S. citizen with a U.S. bank account, as of Friday the 13th of October, they are now allowing you immediate exchange of up to 25,000 US dollars into Bitcoin for immediate delivery through Coinbase. Previously, customers had to wait several days if they could even get the cash out of their account to do it. Well, I tell you, that weekend, Bitcoin jumped 500, 1,000, 1,500 US dollars over the next 2 to 3 days. Well, was I ever glad I was in Bitcoin with a good chunk of Bitcoin by the time that came along. And boom, you're seeing your portfolio jump 5, 10, 15, 20,000 dollars over the weekend. It was exciting stuff. And that was just with a small amount of Bitcoin. Imagine if you were holding 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 of the things. You're making hundreds of millions and billions of dollars when this sort of thing comes out. Ledger X, oh, look at this. Trades 1 million in Bitcoin derivatives in the first week. This exchange here, Ledger X, the first regulated cryptocurrency derivatives trades have taken place. Now let's click on this link here because it takes us off to a very interesting site called usdebtclock.org. And if you're keeping up with the news at any point in time, you know that every 90 days, give or take a bit, the US government has to borrow about $1 trillion these days from the Federal Reserve to pay the bills, right? You got to pay for the rent of the White House. You got to pay for the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard. What is it now? There's 4 or 5 of them, isn't it? The Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Marines, and the Coast Guard, the 5 branches of the military. Well, you got to pay for all that stuff. Then you got to add another 700 billion on top because you're going to pay, update all the military equipment. Then you got to pay for the national parks. Yeah. And then the wall, right? You got to build the wall. Well, Trump is right now threatening to just close government down until he gets the wall, the cash for the wall approved. Well, that's what this is. It's called the national debt. Well, that's got nothing to do with the real US debt. That's just the national debt, the government debt. The real debt, when you look down here, we've got total personal debt, you've got student loan debt, 1.5 trillion, credit card debt, 1 trillion, personal loans. Oh, here it is. Let me zoom in if I can. Perhaps you can see it a little bit better here. Currency and credit derivatives is 561, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 561 trillion dollars. And look at the millions going up here. This is the real debt tied to the American dollar. And then you take, US debt clock Canada, US debt clock Europe, US debt clock Asia. There's well over $1,000 trillion worth of debt tied to the fiat currency system. It's finished. There's just nowhere else that this can go. It'll never go back to zero. Your currency in the bank will never go up in value. It's only ever going to go down in value due to inflation, and that inflation is increasing consistently over time because of that. But what's happening now is that things are changing. You can now, with a click of a mouse, move 100 million, 1 billion, 10 billion, $100 billion into cryptos with a click of a mouse. And we've got 535 trillion to go. Now, it's not really happening yet because, and we'll explain a little bit as to what's going on. Bitcoin futures, they came along on December the 10th. Now you can trade in Bitcoin futures. And as I mentioned this morning, Microsoft and Starbucks have got together to set up their own futures Bitcoin exchange deal, where you can now also use Bitcoin to order Frappuccinos at Starbucks. They're all getting into the act now. What are we here? The Bitcoin rate of growth. So this was the last few months of last year. I kept track of things here. So October the 20th, the market cap was 87 billion, of which, and this is the market cap, of Bitcoin, right? The 24-hour volume in Bitcoin is 1.3 billion in the price. Then we have like 7 days, 9 days later, and then we have a week later, and then a few more days later by the end of the month, and then a week later, and then a month later, 2 days later. And look at this, it was up to 1/3 of $1 trillion already as the market capitalization for Bitcoin. And boom, look at the exchange rate and the price. I mean, that's pretty exciting stuff if you're in the market playing the game. And that's what these big boys were doing, was playing the game. Now, this is the blood, sweat, tears, and equity time that has gone into the ecosystem that is Bitcoin. There's 180 exchange companies. There's 83 Bitcoin payment companies up until when this was done. The infrastructure, the Bitcoin applications, big data, investments, services. It is so deeply integrated right now into the financial system. This ain't going away. It's not going away. This is only going to move forwards. And that's why it's vitally important to get some Bitcoin. Because with Bitcoin, you can then exchange it to Ethereum, Dash, all the other things. Bitcoin is going to be called, is kind of, well, what is it? Is it currency? Is it a true store of value? Is it, it's a conduit. It's a conduit between, for all intended purposes, fiat, Bitcoin, cryptos, Bitcoin, fiat currency. It's a conduit between the two, but they're all in it. The whole lot of them are at the trough here. And what they've done last year with the cash going in and out, the fiat currency, trillions of dollars moved into and out of the crypto market. Billions and hundreds of billions in dollars of profit was earned by this lot and the likes of, you know, some of us that were in it. And what they're doing now is going, holy smokes, they're all looking at each other going, this thing works. Look at what we've made. Now imagine what it's going to be like once it's regulated and licensed. So let's get to it, boys. And they're all pushing for the regulated entities like the SEC and all that stuff to get it regulated and under control and licensed. And then you will see the flow of capital into cryptos like you will not believe. Here's 50 world, I just got this one the other day, 50 world applications for blockchain. It was about 63,000 new applications for blockchain was established last year alone. Anybody can download the software for blockchain. And then you get in and set up your own deal, whether you want to be in real estate or car leasing, and everything will go blockchained in the future, including the stock market. It's as he says, it's the most massive thing on the internet that's going to be affecting our lives, not in the future, but now moving forward into the future. So let's get back to our graph. As I say, April the 1st, when I read that article, Japan becomes legal tender, I said, I don't care about the price, I don't understand it, but I'm in. I'm in. So I cashed in some gold, went and get some Bitcoin. And the funny thing is, when I cashed in the gold, they ask you here in Canada, what are you using your cash for? And I said, I'm going to go and get some Bitcoin. These guys, they just laughed their heads off. Oh, you'll never make money in that. And what was it? About a week or 2 weeks later, it became more valuable than gold. And it went up and up and up and up and up, and then it started coming down again. And when it was coming down, everyone I knew was, oh, I told you what an idiot you were and blah, blah. But I knew, because I'm reading graphs here, it's going to hit a retracement level. And it came right back to 38.2. We covered that last week, I think, in our training. And then what did I do? I got more. It's called dollar cost averaging. If you get in at the peak and it comes down, you're losing. But if you're in the valley and you get in, you're gaining. So the two divided by each other, the losses and the gains divided by the number you've got, is dollar cost averaging. And when it started moving up, man, the profit started pouring in. Then as it came down again, I started getting more. I'm going, wow, we got a retracement on our hands, get more. 50%, I got even more. And then boom, what was the next milestone that we had here? Come on. Oh, my mouse is stuck here again. Sorry, I gotta get out of this and get back in again to reboot here it is. Okay, so we had April the 1st. It became more valuable than gold. We had our first major retracement here as it starts moving up here. Our second major retracement here, October the 13th. And by then I had not hundreds by any means, but I had some in my portfolio here. And if you can see, these are one-day candlesticks, right? And the next couple of days, it went up by $1,500. And it's exciting things here, right? It was Ledger X becomes the first derivatives exchange, capitalization, and then I ran out of space. It just kept going up to about 24,000 Canadian dollars. And it was the most exciting thing. Now it's come back down now and it's hovering right at 68, 7,000, 7,005 as we physically speak. But there's a lot of regulation, as I say, and licensing going on right now. So what's happening now is 2018 and beyond. This is the time we really want to get in. this is the time that millions and tens and hundreds of millions of people are going to start getting into cryptos, because it's out there. The world is out there. Now I've got the full video here. I'm not going to show that. You need to watch that at your own time on TED.com or whatever that is. What's TED.com? So with that, I've kind of finished what I wanted to cover this morning, and we've had a good 1 hour doing that. So if whoever's doing the recording wants to stop the recording here, and then we can open this up for questions or comments or whatever. So anybody got any comments or questions they'd like to ask? And unmute yourself if you can, well, if you can, or put your hand up and I'll unmute you.
Robin, this is Mark Stevens. Don't particularly have a question, but I would like to compliment you as, again, you've done a phenomenal job. I would imagine some of those videos, if you want to get a hold of them, you can go to the internet and find them.
Yeah.
I mean, like on YouTube.
Yeah, the fractional reserve thing is from a video. In fact, here, if I can type it onto something, let's type it onto a new page on here, maybe at the very bottom. Add slide. Let's just put a blank slide on here. Here we go. It's Zeitgeist. T-G-E-I-G-E-I-T-Z, I think it is. I think that's how it's spelled.
You mean Zeitgeist? Or?
Yeah, Zeitgeist. Yeah, addendum. A-D-E-N-D-U-M.
Guys.
It's the addendum one. It's absolutely, this Zeitgeist stuff is brilliant. You want to watch them all. I forget the guy that actually puts them together. He's the narrator on this.
Oh, so all these videos are on here then?
No, they're not all on that, but that one about the Federal Reserve is. And but this Zeitgeist stuff is brilliant. It's just absolutely remarkable education.
I got the money mechanics. I mean, umpteen years ago.
Yeah.
And I had that, but you know, the way you put this together is just phenomenal. I think I'm going to, probably like you did, I'm going to be watching this particular training over and over and over.
Well, as I say,
Bitcoin. Bitcoin is 7,000 right now.
Yeah, and it's moving up slowly, right? Yeah. It's
so now's the time. Yeah, so I'm going to go buy some right quick. So.
Well, what made Bitcoin jump about $1,300, $1,400, $1,500 a few weeks ago is the news that the Winklevoss brothers had put in a new application, a second application, with the Securities and Exchange Commission to have Bitcoin, I don't know, on some EFT, electronic fund transfers. EFTs is the big thing. Now, what the Securities and Exchange Commission has done is put that off and now until September for the decision, but everyone's saying their decision is going to be no. But however, right behind that, there's another 5 applications by some of the big players too. So every application has differences in it. Well, okay, we won't agree to this, but we'll agree to that. It's negotiation. That's what's going on right now, is negotiation. And once the negotiations are over and it's approved and the thumbs are up, and the big hurdle behind the whole thing really is insurance. Like when the housing market collapsed down your way to begin with in the United States, it collapsed for one main reason. There wasn't enough insurance to back up the toxic assets, right? The housing market.
At the time.
So that's why it absolutely collapsed. So what the regulators are saying this time is, listen, we're not going to put any regulations through until you've got insurance behind it. Well, apparently there's some insurance behind some of these applications. And once it's 100% insured behind the applications and it's approved, you will see trillions move into cryptos and Bitcoin within very short order. And you'll see Bitcoin doing like what it did on the graph in 2017. You'll see this again at the end of 2018, 2019. Whenever it goes through, you'll see this happen again. And Bitcoin is going to jump back to 20,000, 30,000, 50,000. Once 1.4 trillion has moved into Bitcoin, it's worth about $100,000 a coin. Doesn't take any genius mathematician to figure that out. All it takes is, well, how can I get in? And again, the other question that I get a lot is, well, I can't afford Bitcoin at $7,000 a coin, so I'm not interested. Well, again, people just don't have the foggiest clue. If you can't afford 7,000 for a Bitcoin, get half a Bitcoin. Get a tenth of a Bitcoin at $700. Get 0.001 at $70.
throw $1,000 in there, it'll be amazing what'll happen to it.
Exactly. So start your portfolio and start getting your Bitcoin and or your Dash and the other things that we talk about within CryptoCashNation, and following the recommendations that CryptoZ gives. Not by the letter, make your own decisions, but start a savings plan. As I say, we've all got the cash anyway. We're just spending in stupid ways. I'll give you an example here. Yesterday, I went back to see this chap. I told him about this a couple of years ago. And, he had to do his thing, which was selling vitamin B through distribution, through shops and things. Vitamin B. Anyway, he got about 50 stores set up, and they've got some customers, and he's making a living. And all of that money went into, he's got himself a big truck, he's got his wife a car, he's got a big rig, caravan type thing, and a big truck to tow that, and he's got the house, and he's got the 2 kids, and blah, blah, blah. And then about 6 months ago, it all collapsed because he got stressed out and had heart failure and had to go and have a heart operation. He's 10 years younger than me, but looks like he's 30 years older than me. And, the stress got him. Now he's listening because he's got about 6 months left of cash left. He's burnt out, and he's not living the American dream. He's experiencing the American nightmare. Now he's listening. Well, what did you do last year, Robin? Well, let me show you what I did. And he's just blown away because I made 10 times more than he did by doing nothing, sitting at home and watching YouTube videos and having fun and playing video games. Am I stressed? No. So now he's listening. And we're going to get him prepared for that for this whole next thing coming up here in CryptoCashNation.
Here's a quick idea for everybody. If you're not afraid of talking to business people, a lot of them, small businesses, and some large ones, have not really secured their retirement. Mm-hmm. They don't have what they need, or they don't know what they need. And if you start introducing them to CryptoCashNation, you can get their attention, and everybody will make quite a bit of everything. So that's just an idea. Sure.
And just to expound on that, can you guys hear me okay, Robin?
Yeah, yes. You can quit the recording now if you want, Russ.
I think that's JC. For some reason I couldn't record it for you. I had to get JC to do it. Because I gave you the host versus a co-host. That's why that happened. Okay. But outside of that, these are good questions to have on this anyways. But when I started trading last year, I put in two $10 commissions from Coinbase for setting up Zoltan and Phil in Coinbase. I started with $20. That wasn't even from me, from them, and then and over a little bit of time, it turned into $50, and then to $300, and at that time I kept learning, and then started putting in some more from other things that we were doing, Robin, and ended up putting in about 3,000. I think it was 3,000 Canadian. Which ultimately 16 months later, 15, 16, I was able to, live off of for about 8 months. So it's not like you have to put in a lot. You just got to keep chipping away at it and throwing a little bit in. So, sometimes you might make a decision, guys, to, instead of going out for that fast food meal of 20 or 30 bucks or whatever it is, what's more important at that point? Go, geez, if I could buy $30 of Bitcoin today, or even with CryptoCashNation, if I can make $30 today or $50 in Bitcoin today, based on what Zoltan went through a few weeks ago with respect to the halving, if Bitcoin is actually worth 250,000 in May of 2020, and you make $50 today at about 7,500, that Bitcoin you made today, if you don't use it, and you just sit on it as your crypto portfolio, you're looking at $1,700 in 2 years with that $50 is that you made today. So every day that you don't do something in this, every day that you don't share this, every day that you don't do, you don't take some of that debt spending that you're spending and throw just a little bit at this, just chip away at it. And what you're going to find over time, you're going to be put in a position that as you start to learn how to trade more, to trade in the pullbacks, and that's actually coming by Monday in course 3, how to trade pullback, so that you're not super hodling all the time. You're actually taking profits in there as well. You're going to be in a really, really good place, and you're going to be able to build, within 700 days, a substantial portfolio as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a mom and dad, or a single person, to put yourself and your family in a position to have walkaway income in 2 years, if that's what you truly desire. It's there for all of us. It's just a matter of, if you're going to do it or not. I just want to give everybody a quick update on executive. I'm just waiting back to hear from the bankers on how we can get everybody paid out. And I'm hoping that information comes to us on Monday, so we can finalize something and then get us going, early next week on that. So.
Brilliant.
So that was my 2 cents there, Robin.
No, I just found this article I was talking about Microsoft and Starbucks setting up a new partnership, and it's more than just being able to walk into Starbucks and get a frappuccino. What does it say down here? Starbucks Intercontinental Exchange, Microsoft and BGG launch a new company called whatever this is, BAKTT, that will enable customers and institutions. Well, I can assure you an institution worth a few billion isn't concerned about buying Starbucks frappuccinos, to buy, sell, store, and spend cryptocurrencies on a global network by November. See, more and more companies, as I say, everyone and their mother-in-law is getting into this that know what they're doing. And because now once these sort of things start biting, as I say, it's going to legitimize this whole crypto market again and again and again. And that was an interesting article. I'll get that to my presentation. Now, anybody else with any comments or questions here? Because you've got Russ on the line. Crypto Z is there. We may want to ask him a question or two, or myself, or if not, we can move on with the weekend here.
Just another comment, as like Mark said, every time I sit and watch a presentation, I learn. I just get this, oh man, we are at the right place again at the right time. And like you said, Russ, it doesn't take a lot. Just, 20, 30 bucks a week put into an account. Where could it happen and have these type of gains? Again, let's strap ourselves in, because we're just going on the ride. The ride's starting. Great job, Robin.
Just so, thank you. Good feedback. Okay, any other quick questions for us while you got this on the line?
Just quickly, I would like to kind of compliment you, Robin, as well. And I'm glad that you just brought up this last kind of slide, because at the end of the day, all of you who have been listening to us, you may ask yourself and then ask, now, hey, but really, what is in it for me? And it's a very valid question. And I also appreciate every one of your time, because these type of kind of lessons certainly deserve quality time to listen to. So after this, if it's not recorded, then the previous one should be a good kind of time to re-listen, because that's the key, that education, that informed and educated sources. CryptoCashNation's task is to bring basically these sources to you, and all these information, like something like that. If Starbucks, Starbucks and some other retailers have been now not just considering, but making really steps along Microsoft, and then other major blue chip companies, and then Japan and countries. And for example, Malta in Europe has become now a blockchain basically capital, being just, a country, but a blockchain capital, so to speak, for brokerages like Binance and so forth. So to cut long story short, please do your own kind of research as well. Don't just rely on us. However, please do see really the forest from the trees, how to navigate these mega financial tsunami, what we will be facing, the next few years. Because from the debt society, nobody else was able for now to offer any reasonable solution except the cryptocurrencies. And why? Because, for example, Bitcoin being limited supply, this is a deflationary financial tool opposed to the inflationary fiat currencies. And no wonder, why do we see increasing kind of power struggle about who owns, who controls what, and what cryptocurrency can offer you? And that is the benefit. What is in it for me? That you can control at least much better, your own financial kind of well-being, opposed to just having inflationary fiat currencies. And it will be a transitional, that's what I see, a transitional period. So fiat currencies will be existing with cryptocurrencies, but the sooner you can join and the sooner you can get education yourself, the more prepared you will be for the next few years and beyond, because it won't stop here. And thank you very much for your time and attention, and absolutely a big kind of claps to you, Robin. Great presentation.
Good. Well, we've got the next most important event we have is going to be Monday evening, the webinar, then Tuesday evening, where we're going to have more of a standard. We're working on more of a standard presentation with the top people in the company here. So with that, let's just end the presentation, and good afternoon, evening, and afternoon or morning or wherever you are, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you on Monday.
Yes.
Peace and blessings.
Kudos. Cheers.